one of the things that I'm looking to do this year is really pick up my speaking engagements,
Good.
right? And I know you're one of the world's best,
Thank
speakers, right? So where did you start, and what would you recommend for somebody like me to get started to start getting on some bigger stages and things like that?
Well, let me take you through that because
Yeah.
I help a lot of people with their speaking career. And it's funny because some of them aren't the best speakers in the world, but they have followed the methodology and they get really high paying speaking gigs and they get a lot of speaking offers. So the first thing is that speaking is based off of two things:
Okay.
lessons and stories.
Mm,
See, from the beginning of time, if you look on the caveman's wall, what was up on the wall? Stories. And what do you think those stories, the purpose of those stories, for the sake of what were they putting them up there?
it
Teach lessons.
teach lessons, and I bet it transferable, right? Like it will go down generations, right?
In fact, I'm keynoting here at AmCon, and that's what Renee Rodriguez teaches, is that the human mind has most of its time daydreaming. And so
Mm,
via lessons and stories, we create the narrative, the reality in people's minds. And so there is this divine connection that we have with other people, and we connect in this divinity by telling lessons and stories. So the first step of being a great teacher is to capture every time a lesson is given to you. So good. Thank you. Yeah. So anytime, I'll give a speech. People come up to me all the time. Man, that was the best speech I ever heard. You changed my life. Really? What was it? Because I made them feel a certain way.
yeah.
But what I want people to do is when they hear something, you'll see me do this all the time. I'll hear or say a lesson. I'll stop everything and text myself because I want to capture the lessons that resonate with me, because that means it's at my frequency, which
Mm,
means my community who's at my frequency, it'll resonate with more of them. They then will communicate with their communities and it'll resonate with them. So step number one, capture all lessons that resonate with you, create a system that you then attach stories to the lesson. Now, when you speak, all you have to know is what lessons you want to teach. The stories come naturally. I tell
okay.
about be more interested than interesting.
Yes.
I have a note next to be more interested than interesting. It says my brother at the hospital, because that's the first time I ever heard it. And I know the story about how stupid I was at 18. And I went in to be a doctor, talked to my brother about being a doctor. And the first thing I said is, I hate hospitals. And he's like, dude, you're pre-med. You hate hospitals? I'm like, I'll be a sports doctor. Sidelines, locker rooms. He's like, David, you got to be in a hospital to be a doctor. I don't care what kind of doctor. You're an idiot. Can I give you a piece of advice? Be more interested than interesting. And so since the time I was 18 years old, I've been looking for the light, the love, and the lessons. Number one lesson in speaking. Two, practice. Anytime I love getting paid. One thing about being a great coach, I love getting paid for two things. One, being annoying, which includes being repetitive and honest,
Okay.
right? Because the only way people learn is to keep repeating yourself. And then I keep repeating myself, telling people and getting paid for it. How can I get better at X, David? Practice.
So do you believe in a signature talk, or do you think that you should no, you
Lessons and stories, man.
lessons and stories?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have signature lessons and stories.
Okay.
And when they give you a time frame, which is why I'm a time freak when it comes, especially to be on stage, I know how many. I do an intro. I introduce the lessons I'm going to teach. I go ahead and tell the lessons and the stories. And then I have a conclusion that goes ahead and repeats the lessons and the stories. And so then the second thing about coaching, which is really fun, is that when you get to be a big coach or a big speaker, people will pay you money to coach them. And then they're too afraid to call you and ask for help.
Mm.
I go, what a great business model. A whole bunch of people pay you. And then I'm like, why didn't you call me for help? Oh, I didn't want to bother you. I'm like,
Oh,
I thought you
wow.
were paying me. But
Wow.
anyway, as a speaker, you got to practice.
Well, I was going to ask you on that note, I'm actually launching my first coaching business this December. I'll be coaching financial advisors and insurance agents how to do compliance-friendly marketing. And because it's kind of a sticky point in my industry, compliance is a real high,
Yeah.
and they don't know how to market online. I kind of figured that out. And so I figured I'll create a coaching model around it to teach other agents and advisors how to do it. And so what would you say is, a big lesson or takeaway, something that from your coaching business that's made you one of the top business coaches? Because I'm going
Yeah.
into that. So
Yeah. And that's a good coaching business, by the way. And in fact, remind me afterwards, I have a deal that I have to bring you and your clientele that can make us both a ton of money in
Let's
the
go.
insurance business. So, just remind me, Wilson is the guy's name. So
Wilson, I'll
you
remember
got
that.
it. Anyways, in order to, market, your coaching or why coaching works is because you have to look at it in a quantitative way.
Okay.
Most people look at it in an emotional way. Most coaches make you feel good, kind of like my speech.
Mm.
I guarantee if you're a real coach, you should be able to say, hey man, I'm this much a month. I work month to month. I don't lock you in, and every month is guaranteed. And be able to not only articulate the value to exceed what you're asking for in a quantitative way with credibility and emotional attachment, but you have to quantify the reasons, the impact, and the capabilities that you have. Infuse that value by having capabilities. But most people, as coaches, they just rely on the emotional aspect
Mm.
and making people feel good. Not me. I'm going to sit down and I'll help you in especially compliance and insurance and marketing insurance. Look, if I'm able to increase the amount of people in your community, or I'm able to increase the size of your deals, or the amount of time it takes to accelerate the time it takes to get deals, quantitatively, if you're doing 100 deals, if I get twice as many people, how much is that worth for you? Therefore, when I'm charging you X, can you see the reason you want to move forward? And two, I'm guaranteeing it.
Mm.
So if you don't have the money, which you'll hear from people when they say, hey man, I'd love to do it, I just don't have the money. That's why you should do it.
Mm-mm.
Because I guarantee that if you're not willing to make the investment with a guarantee,
Mm.
then you're not ready to do it. Why don't you just go find another profession or go get a 9 to 5 job that's going to pay you a consistent salary for being a tube? And when I say
Mm.
being a tube, most people in America, most people around the world live like tubes, food in, food out. That's their whole life. Not for me. If you're going to coach with me or coach a coach with me, then we're going to create quantitative value and guarantee it.